Well, hello and welcome to the Three Attic Network. I'm merrymitch, and I'm here to wish you a happy Sunday. I hoping that the week has gone well for you, that you've made it to this point in good spirits, and that now you're ready for a couple of stories. I'm gonna be reading today, "The Tiger" by Tegan Moore, and "The Library of Lost Things" by Matthew Bright. Thinking that it'll be a nice time, and if you're here for a story, then you've come to the right place. And so, we will pause the delicate jams. That, by the way, is from the newly released Sessions Diana from Riot Games Music. They've been creating compilations of really, really pleasant and nice lo-fi music, all of which are creator safe, which means no DMCA, nothing, no copyright claims to worry about. What they're doing is immensely nice for creators like myself. So if you enjoy the music at any point, go give it a listen. It's something that I actually listen to in my spare time. It is that good. All right, now let's see. I need to find a little bit of ambiance for a museum. Not sure if Tabletop Audio has something like that in specific, but do they have maybe a art museum? They have a 1940s office. I think that might not be the one. I think this tea house was the one that I used last time. Yeah, I think we'll go with this one. Ought to work nicely. Oh, and heck yeah, Kingy. That is for anybody here on the Three Attic Network, all our creators. I'll post a link to it in our chat on the good old Discord. So, this is The Tiger by Tegan Moore. I believe we started this one last time, but I'm gonna go ahead and start at the beginning. The museum was Jules's favorite place in the world, and the path through time was the best part of the museum. It gave him the major creeps, though at 12 he was too old for it to be actually scary. But the path's dark corners held the promise of feeling something besides the anger that had been silting up inside him for months. He wanted to feel little kiddish again, that safe kind of scared that didn't seem to exist anymore. Stepping onto the path's nighttime street was like being picked up out of normal life and set down in olden days. And then, as you walked, older and older days, and all the way back to when animals were huge and everything was tusked, with the short-faced bear at the very end of it all, Arctodus. Slavering, shaggy and clawed, his roar filling the room, teeth and tongue slimy, and eyes like holes in ice. Monster king of the path. Arctodus was in every kid's nightmares. Once you walked the path, he was with you forever, like a god. The path led you to him, whether you hurried or didn't. Half the pleasure was knowing the horror you were headed toward. Sounds drifted along the path from Aunt Lydia's wedding reception. Clinking glasses, little cousins shouting, laughter, and the clipping of heels on cobblestone. That should have made the path less uncanny, but it didn't. There was a sense of awful possibility draped over everything, chill and clammy. Tonight, Arctodus would exist in its truest, purest form. Seeing the bear without distractions, without having to share it, anything might happen. Jules wasn't sure if he was brave enough to do it. Even though the reception was in his favorite part of his favorite place, and even though Aunt Lydia was Jules' grandmother and his favorite adult in the world, he felt awkward. A year ago, he and his mom would have been in the wedding. He didn't know what had happened between his mom and her sister, but it had cost him, Jules, a lot. Aunt Lydia hadn't even written his name on the invitation. Just Emily Kaminsky and family. As if his mom had anyone left besides Jules. As if Jules shouldn't be invited in his own right. Jules wasn't sure he was supposed to be in the museum lobby alone. It had a sour, bitten smell like an attic. Like things in jars. The Alchemy of Preservation. The bath was rented for the party, but everything else was off limits. The other hallway in the lobby, to the ancient Egypt and the gem room, was roped off and the lights were out. That was creepy too, knowing all the mummies were still there in the dark. He'd get someone to come with him to Arctodus. Maybe Aunt Lydia would go. Jules stepped onto the path through time. He passed a factory with dirt-fogged windows, the faint clanking of machinery inside. He'd never noticed that before. That was the sort of thing that made the path so satisfying. There was always a sense of something going on just out of sight. Doors left ajar, lights going on and off behind curtained windows, legs ascending a staircase into the dark. Jules passed an old-fashioned car parked outside the Barker Street Station, where a train whistle blew, then rounded a corner. The lobby was no longer visible. He was on an empty, lamplit cobblestone street lined with shops and homes, glass glowing softly with reflected light. Jules went to the window with the little girl in it. She was the first of the path's citizens. Mannequins, but it was hard not to imagine them as participants in some hoax. Play actors who, when the last field tripper wandered off in search of the ancient Romans or the Amazon rainforest, would let out a breath and slump into a chair. If Jules moved fast enough, or maybe slow enough, he could catch them at it. Much of the path was real. Antique furniture in the houses, clothes on the frozen people. You could smell the molder and furniture polish. Even the animals were real. Taxidermied dogs and horses in town, and wild animals on the prairies and in the woods. Must and formaldehyde. They'd been alive once, and now they were dead, but pretending they weren't. The little girl in the window had the same dead, not dead look. The girl was waiting for her mom and dad. She was ringletted and innocent. She looked cold. She clutched a doll, a porcelain-faced shepherdess with a long crook in one hand. Not the kind of toy for hugging. The girl didn't look like she'd ever been hugged, either. Jules didn't like that window much, but it didn't matter. He had to look. It was a ritual. Doing obeisance. Obeisance? Obeisance? Hang on. Deferential respect.
Obeisance.
Obeisance. Alright, I did have that right. Thank you. Doing obeisance to the path and to the whole museum. The little girl was always the beginning, just like Arctodus was always the end. Something convinced Jules suddenly that the girl was glaring, that she hated him for keeping her there like a pin-pierced butterfly. If he turned his head, she would come unstuck and... what? Jules stared into the girl's eyes. Don't look away. Reflected light glossed her black pupils. Her eyes were cold and focused like a hunting cat's. Don't look away. Maybe her parents wouldn't ever come home. People died all the time back then. They sank on the Titanic or died of the flu. Maybe Arctodus got them. Jules' toes curled. Nerves bubbled inside him. Something else, too. A hot feeling left over from his earlier argument with his mom. She hadn't wanted to come to the wedding, and Jules had to yell to get her to listen. Aunt Lydia was her godmother. Aunt Lydia was his godmother. She was his mom's best friend. Or she had been. Your parents are dead, he whispered to the girl in the window. Something flickered across her eyes, and it looked, for a second it really looked, like she'd glanced behind Jules. His heart stuttered. But of course, when he turned, it was just Aunt Karen, passing along the cobblestone street toward the lobby. He turned back to the window. The girl's tiny pearl teeth were barred, nose rigid with wrinkles like a snarling animal. At first, he believed he actually saw that, and he even stepped back as though the girl might smash through the window. Tiny doll fists reaching for his dress shirt. But he didn't. She was just the same boring, frilly little girl. Jules staggered off the curb. He wanted to run, which was ridiculous. He had a good imagination, and that made it easy to scare himself. He turned away from the window and started walking toward the party, though he still felt the girl's stare. A squeal interrupted the quiet, and some little dressed-up cousin ran down the cobbled street. Sophia chased them. She was Jules' age, in a flowery dress with a babyish yoke of lace around the neck. Sophia's fingers were bent like claws, and she was growling. And when she caught one cousin around the waist, the little girl dissolved into hysterical giggles. "I'm gonna eat you," Sophia said, and shook her cousin back and forth. Jules thought about going back the way he'd come, but it was too late. "Hey!" Sophia called to him. "Come play with us!" The 1800s hotel was at the end of the street, right before the next twist in the path. It was busy with voices and movement. Jules pretended he hadn't heard Sophia and slipped onto the hotel's porch. Inside was a fancy bar where you could buy sarsaparilla, which tonight was a real bar for grown-ups. There were dusty plush chairs you could sit in, and old-fashioned music playing from hidden speakers. Adults were everywhere. Immediately, Jules heard his mother's voice. She was crying, leaky and whiny, on the far side of the room, twisted into an overstuffed chair with an empty wine glass in one hand. She had her brother Thomas's shoulder clutched in her other. "He's an animal," she said. "When I married him, I never would have thought he was such a goddamn animal." Jules felt himself winding up tight, vaguely aware that Sophia had followed him into the hotel. He turned away, hooked his arms over the bar's edge, and stepped up on the brass kick rail. He asked the man behind the bar for a Coke. "Coming right up," the bartender said. Sophia climbed up next to him. "I'll have a Sprite. I'm not supposed to have caffeine." She rolled her eyes and then leaned back, testing her balance on the rail. Jules ignored her. The bartender gave them both their sodas. Sophia sucked her straw into her mouth while still balancing on the rail. Conversationally, she said, "Sorry about your parents." From the corner of his eye, he saw his mother lean into Thomas's arm. He couldn't hear the crying anymore. Maybe she was done. "Thanks," he said, looking at the glass of Coke in front of him. What were you supposed to say when someone said they were sorry your parents got divorced? Sophia couldn't understand. Jules didn't care if she was sorry. It didn't help. Better if his dad said sorry, since the affair was his fault. But at least his dad didn't shout at Jules and cry in public all the time. His dad didn't talk about the divorce at all, or his pregnant girlfriend, or what it would be like when Jules had a half-sibling, which Jules's mom only ever called the little bastard. His dad just showed up every other weekend to take Jules to movies and things, and acted normal. Normal wasn't right either. Something was broken. Seriously broken. But at least his dad didn't act crazy. Jules' mom was crazy. She had some feral, furious, grieving thing inside her, which she refused to tame. So if anyone should be sorry, it should really be Jules' mom. But then he saw her coming toward him. Thomas in tow, face composed despite red-rimmed eyes, and whatever was cut loose in Jules swung toward her. The magnetism that had pushed him away reversed, and he wanted to be close to his mother, feral or not. Thomas leant against the bar. Jules' mom smiled and stroked Jules' back. Hey, Sophia. Being good, Julian? Yeah. I was telling your uncle about you going to state for poetry, Jules' mom said. She pushed her empty wine glass toward the bartender. You should do your poem. You want to hear him, Tom? He's so good. Mom, Jules said. Behind him, Sophia sucked the last of her soda out of her cup, liquid slurping past ice. Come on, his mom said. Then, as if he'd forgotten how it went, she said, Tiger, tiger. Jules sighed, exasperated. Now if he didn't do it, she'd just do it herself, or try to, and ruin it. He stepped away from the bar. Uncle Thomas and the bartender both turned expectantly. The Tiger, by William Blake, he said. He did the poem. He did the gestures. What dream hand, and what dread feet, explaining the story with the way he told it. And by the time he got to, did he who made the lamb make thee, his expression had grown puzzled, a little fearful, a little amazed. All those things at once. He was acting, and because he had won district for 6th graders and was going to the state competition, he guessed he was pretty good at it. There was an essay he'd written and memorized too, explaining the poem. How in Blake's time, people didn't know about dinosaurs, so a tiger was the scariest thing they could imagine. How back then, everyone believed that God made everything, and God was supposed to be like a loving parent. And it was confusing that he'd make something like man-eating tigers. It meant you had to accept the bad, scary parts of life if you wanted to really appreciate the good ones. But Jules' mom never cared if he did that part. When he said the second, fearful symmetry that ended the poem, his mom clapped. And Uncle Thomas and the bartender had to clap too. Sophia hopped down off the rail, clapping too hard. Wow! Sophia said. Tiger! Tiger! Isn't he good? He got the acting from me, his mom said to Thomas. Remember my senior play? I never got the chance to do anything of that after high school, after I married Rob. She looked at Jules appraisingly. Don't get married young. Yeah, Mom, he said. No problem. Oh, there's your Papa John, his mom said. I'll go get him, and you can do it again. Mom, Jules said, sliding out of her reach. I just did it. He grabbed his Coke and hurried toward the front door of the hotel, relieved that she didn't call him back. Sophia followed. On the porch, she did a dramatic jitter. I drank my soda too fast. Sugar rush! The street was emptied again. The street was empty again. The little cousins gone. Jules turned the corner around the front of the hotel. Puddles glistened in the gutter. The path here was further back in time, no longer cobblestones and gingerbread trim, but dirt roads and rough borders, like a Western movie. Jules sat on a bench across the street from the saloon. Hang on. Yeah, let's go. The path here was further back in time, no longer cobblestones and gingerbread trim, but dirt roads and rough borders, like a Western movie. Jules sat on a bench across the street from the saloon. Distant, jangly piano music came through its dusty window, and set his Coke next to him. He didn't want it anymore. He waited for the magical, held breath feeling to come back, but it wouldn't. Maybe Sophia kept the feeling at bay, her heels banging on the plank sidewalk. He didn't want her coming with him to Arctotis. She'd ruin that too. But he didn't think he could look at the bear alone. A group of people were gathered at the end of the street, doing something wedding official on the general store's porch. Jules saw the blaze of his Aunt Lydia's white dress. She hadn't even said hi to him yet. Jules wanted to go up to her and slide inside her arms for one of her extra squeezy hugs. Hear her say, "Julian," in her bubbly voice. Like she was so surprised and delighted that he existed. He looked away. Sophia plopped next to him on the bench. Jules felt his body go tight, teeth crushing together. He waited a few seconds, then gasped. Soph, he whispered, frozen. Don't move. Someone's watching. Sophia scrunched up her face. What? Jules knew the streets of the path through time, or most of them. Behind them, in the second-story window, a witchy old woman with a crooked nose was posed peering out at the street. He didn't have to check to know they were on the right bench, in the right spot. And he bet Sophia didn't know about her. Don't move. The skeptical look on Sophia's face was melting toward uncertainty, but she didn't look scared yet. Jules whipped around and pointed at the window where the woman watched. There! He'd been ready to jump up and run, hoping to spook Sophia back to the party. But he dropped his hand. Nobody was in the window. The curtain was drawn. Nice try, Sophia said. There's supposed to be, he muttered. Why wasn't Sophia catching on? He might have to just tell her to go away. He got up and stalked toward the general store. The path had always been the same, all Jules' life. Why would they change something? Especially something cool, like a creepy witch spying on you. A flash snapped from the general store, an epileptic crack, crack of lightning. Aunt Lydia and her new husband posed for photos. Aunts and uncles had gathered, along with Papa Jan and Lucia Gloria. Uncle Thomas and Jules' mom came out of the hotel. His mom tripped on the step, but managed not to spill anything from the tumbler she carried. Jules heard his uncle say something, and his mom laughed. They joined the picture group. Jules looked back at the curtained window. If he looked hard, he thought he could see a silhouette against the fabric. The old lady was there, but with the curtain drawn. Maybe the fabric had come loose. He thought maybe the curtains were moving. In, out, like something was breathing against them. Jules felt his breathing sink with the sway. In, out, in, out. A laugh from the photo group broke his reverie. His mom hugged Lydia and said something, patting the groom on the arm like he was a little dog. Then she turned to everyone and shouted, "Let's hope he's not a cheating son of a bitch like mine, ha!" She might start crying again. When his mom cried, people always expected Jules to do something about it. He glanced at the window one last time before putting his head down to slip past the gathered family. There was a sharp twist to the path beyond the store. Here the road turned muddy and rough, or at least was made to look that way, while still being wide and flat enough for strollers. There was a rustic schoolhouse and a prairie diorama with a covered wagon train leading off into a painted background of high grass. It was supposed to be early morning, but the lights here were dim. Maybe this area wasn't part of the rental, or maybe it was just different at night. Jules leant against the split rail fence that bordered a marsh and looked at a frozen naturalist sketching a hawk. Sophia caught up with him. "Where are you going?" "Nowhere. Just following the path." "You aren't going all the way to the end, are you?" "I don't know. Why not?" "My mom said we're supposed to stay by the hotel." Sophia's mom made up a lot of rules. "My mom didn't tell me that. But you should go back, or you might get in trouble." "Are you gonna go look at the bear?" He imagined her pretending fear in front of Arctodus. A grunt of irritation crawled out of him. "Sophia, why don't you go play or something?" Her face crumpled with anger. "I can stay if I want." Jules sighed and pushed away from the fence. Next on the path was a settler house nestled in the woods. Jules could smell wood smoke, though probably that was something from the wedding. There was the sound of someone chopping wood, and a taxidermied cat curled up on the porch. Jules wondered if they'd gotten the dead cat, where they'd gotten the dead cat. Two pioneer kids, a girl holding a little boy's hand, were frozen among the trees that besieged the house. A thick forest of summer green and nighttime blue made darker, denser in the low light. Where are you going? Sophia said again, doggedly following. Jules stopped and stared into the woods. Those wolves are gonna get them. There aren't any wolves. He pointed. Right there. It was hard to tell where the fake trees stopped and the painted trees began. Sophia took a step closer. There's no wolves. Jules drools. I'm not scared. You've seriously never seen them? The farmstead soundtrack played. Chickens balking about their business. The thwack of an axe in wood. A dog barked. Birdsong. Cheery, even in twilight. Sophia took another step. You're a liar, and I don't believe you. She sort of believed him. Look. Right there. Sophia edged up to the rail to look. Right before Jules was about to grab her, the soundtrack played a wolf howl. Ow! Sophia squeaked and darted back toward the camera flash and burble of party sounds. When she was at the corner, she turned and shouted, Jerk! Jules watched her go, and then squinted into the woods. There weren't any wolves. Or there had never been before. Had that changed too? In the dark, he thought there might be the outline of a big, shaggy dog back there. Maybe more than one. A liquid feeling seeped into his belly. He didn't want to stay there. A younger Jules would have run away too, followed Sophia back to the safety of family. But this Jules hesitated. He watched the maybe dog shape in the woods. Was it painted or real amid the trees? He felt like it was there and shouldn't be. If he stayed where he was, Sophia might return. Or worse, the shape might move. He stepped away from the fence. His heart banged his rib cage. Not fast, just hard. The path felt strange, unfamiliar, even though he knew it backward and forward. Dangerous, even though it wasn't and couldn't be. Beyond the homestead was the pre-Columbian section, before white people took over America. Here the path became a trail through the wilderness, though one with handrails. There was more forest, with skunks and a cougar hunting elk. In a clearing, there was a cluster of Osage houses, tidy structures slabbed with bark shingles that Jules had repeatedly failed to replicate in the band of trees behind his house. Bare-chested kids chased each other. A woman buried her hands in the vines of her garden. All exactly as it had always been, because the path wasn't supposed to change. At the edge of the clearing, a deer hung upside down from a tree, while a man peeled its skin off. Its muscle gleamed licorice red. The architecture of its ribs and the little cords of fiber between them fascinating. Delicately gory. Delicately gory. When you walked past, you could see the darker red that showed in the flap cut in its belly. Clouded eyes, little pink tongue between its teeth. Once, standing here with his dad, his father had explained how to skin a deer. His dad said he would take Jules hunting when he was older. If you weren't old enough to drive a car, you weren't old enough to shoot a gun, he said. Even though he'd done it when he was a kid. But as soon as Jules had his learner's permit, they would borrow guns from his mom's brothers. That was 3 years away. Almost forever. But the promise stood. Who would they borrow guns from after the divorce? Especially with his mom crying to everyone. None of his uncles would loan his dad anything after that. He felt suddenly seasick, wobbly. He gripped the railing, pressed his forehead against it, and squeezed his eyes closed. There was a smell in his nostrils. A sick smell. Like a hospital, but dirtier. A roadkill smell. A dead meat smell. He heard a zippy hum, the buzzing of flies lifting and settling again. His eyes snapped open, focused on the deer carcass. Beyond the Osage man's back, the flayed muscles glistened in the low light. His mother's voice carried around the corner, along with the clipping heels of approaching footsteps. Jules stood up. A giant tree split the path just beyond the Osage houses. The Osage houses. Jules stepped behind it and crouched down. He regretted it immediately. Only little kids hid from their parents. He still felt nauseated. He leant against the cool, smooth trunk to keep his balance. There were two sets of footsteps. "I just want to tell you," his mom was saying. Her voice was liquid and unhinged. "I just need to talk to you about... I want to say... You're spilling," Aunt Lydia's voice. His mom and his aunt came closer. Jules tried not to move. His pulse rose in his ears. Right in front of him was one of his favorite parts of the whole path. A tiny, white-spotted fawn tucked into a puff of grass. It lay flat against the ground and was hardly noticeable unless you knew to look. Jules was at eye level with it. The fawn had been real once, like the pioneer cat. Some baby deer had died, and this was what was left. The shell of some perfect little dead thing. Maybe the fawn was the skin deer's baby. Jules remembered telling the girl in the window that her parents were never coming back. Her little pearl teeth and furrowed nose. But that was his imagination. "Oops," Jules' mom said. "Oh, it'll wash out. Can we sit? I love you, Lyd. We need to sit, and... No, probably isn't the right time. I'm so sad. We need to talk, Lyd. You're my sister." Jules could feel the flicking of blood in the veins of his face and neck, in time with his heartbeat. The nasty meat smell coated his tongue, the molten quality of his mother's speech, fragments dissolving into each other. They warmed him the way a sour, burnt miasma warns that someone's lit a cigarette nearby. Easy to know what was around the corner. Let's just enjoy the party, okay? I don't want to talk when you're drinking. I'm not. Lydia, I'm not drunk. I just wish you'd talk to me. His mother's voice was getting higher and faster. I'm so sad. You're not listening. You're my sister. Jules stared at the fawn. His shoulder hurt where he leant against the tree, and his ankles burned from crouching. One of the baby deer's oversized ears flicked. It lifted its head so one tiny hoof could scratch behind its ear. Jules could hear the flutter of the hoof against fur. His eyes stung, and his mouth was dry. The fawn looked him in the eye, the small, bony skull turning on an elegant neck. Then it lay its head down again. Something heavy smacked to the ground. Emily, Aunt Lydia said. Emily, calm down. Breathe, hey. Hey, look at me, breathe. Breathe. Jules toppled backward, away from the fawn, catching himself on the heel of one palm, and tipping sideways. His knee banged against the hard ground. It was real. He'd seen it. It was dead, but it had moved. Julian! Aunt Lydia called. She had one arm around Jules' mom, who was bent and red-faced, eyes bugging, tears smearing her cheeks. She looked like someone in a movie who had been punched in the stomach. A glass lay broken at her feet. Aunt Lydia was pale, her hair piled up and shimmery, her dress as elaborate as the cake they'd cut earlier. She looked like a picture of someone else's aunt getting married, and her expression was almost as desperate as Jules' mom's. Help me with your mom! Jules wanted to run, to flip and scuttle away on all fours. He struggled to his feet. As soon as he was upright, his mother reached for him from Lydia's arms, grabbed onto him while she heaved and shook. Lydia stepped back to let him take his mom's weight. Jules felt stiff and unreal. He didn't want to look at his aunt or his mother, so he stared at the fawn, which didn't move. His mom's breath was hot. Snotty tears soaked his shoulder. Breathe, Aunt Lydia kept saying. And they stood there until his mother calmed down. It took a while. His mom grew heavier and heavier. My good boy, his mom said. She sniffled, recovering. Isn't he a good one, Lyd? Yes, Aunt Lydia said. Emily, I have to get back. The photographer... Oh, his mom said. Have you seen him do his poem? Mom, I don't want to, Julian said, but quietly. Aunt Lydia did not look like she wanted to see Jules do anything. Maybe later. Come on, Jules' mom said. She could have been talking to either of them. Real quick. From the warm and damp cave of her embrace, Jules heard the wet, ringing sound of his mother swallowing. Her arms were hot and bony. Jules tugged himself free. He felt sick, and his cheeks and neck burned. I already did it tonight. Don't make him, Aunt Lydia said. His mom's face seemed gray and papery, like a mask. With both of them against her, she dug in. It's only a minute of your time, she sniped. 1 minute. Again, it wasn't clear who she was talking to. Her sister or her son. Jules mumbled, still looking at the grass that hid the fawn. I'm sick of it. He was sick of a lot of things. His voice got louder, getting desperate. You're always bugging me. She was still teary, barely recovered, but her eyes hardened. Oh, I'm sorry, she sneered. I never ask you for anything. He rolled his eyes. That broke her. You, she spat. You're just like your father. Emily, Lydia said, taking Jules' mother by her shoulder. We're going back. Come on, we have photos. Jules' mother glared at him. One hand at her side twitched, like she might hit him with it. He couldn't help it. He flinched. She'd spank him when he was little, but with spare the rod detachment. Never with the anger that hardened her cheekbones and jawline now. He felt his own body twitch too. In the distance, someone called Lydia's name. Coming, his aunt replied and turned. Jules' mom followed, arm caught in her sister's grip, her mouth tight. One ankle wobbled in its high heel. Jules' face stung like he'd been slapped. That voice. It turned every word into a curse. What had he done to make her so angry? He felt like a fist, clenched up, desperate to hurt something. He put a hand against the smooth bark of the tree. Then he drew it back and hit the tree, open-palmed. It made a loud, wet smack that rang the bones in his hand. He sucked air through his teeth and shook his wrist. He didn't feel any better. Jules turned his back on the future and moved in the other direction. The path grew darker, nighttime again. The plains instead of forest. Ahead, a herd of taxidermed bison were posed trundling around the turn. Trundling around the turn, from the pre-Columbian to the prehistoric. Running in the night like massive, bad dreams. Their coats were ragged and black. As they turned the corner, the bison were replaced by bigger, humpbacked ones. Some extinct kind, and then those by even huger mammoths. And at the end was a mastodon, biggest of all. Great scythes of tusks, curved and white as moon. And then you were at the end of history. Rocks lined the path and kept its creatures at bay. It smelt cool, like the air after thunderstorms. Jules felt crazy. It was anger, he realized. He was so mad.
You're just like your father.
When all she talked about was how much she hated his dad. There was plenty of light along the path, but it wasn't normal. The overhead lights were off completely, illumination coming from somewhere else. Diffuse, as if lit by the moon, screened by painted background clouds. The light pooled like ice, like you were walking someplace snowbound, but bright enough to see. There was the giant sloth, pawing branches toward its shaggy Muppet face. A saber-toothed cat, watching its cubs roll in the ice light. A moose the size of a house, brandishing its antlers at the ugly pig thing. They were motionless, but the room felt like it was full of hidden motion. Things moving behind his back. Jules might have been too afraid to go on, but the anger dammed up inside him, and it was all he could feel. Glass eyes followed him. He couldn't see the giant pelts rippling with breath, rib cages expanding, wet nostrils flickering. But that didn't mean they didn't. In the silent, silvery light, everything was perfectly still, except for the waves' steady, slow motion inhale, exhale. If he were watching, he would have seen it. If the fury hadn't clouded his vision, if the fury hadn't clouded his vision, he could have seen. The further he walked, the angrier he got. It churned, solidified. Or maybe he was afraid. Maybe that's what it really was. Arctodus was shielded behind an outcropping of rocks at the end of the hall, saved for last. Jules could feel its gravity. The air seethed, where the sound of its voice would appear. He kept going. Anger pushed him, but also fear. An awe-filled, childish fear. The kind where you covered your eyes, but peeked out between your fingers. Your first roller coaster ride, strapped in next to your dad, his arm over your shoulder. Except, it was the roller coaster, too. Except it was the roller coaster, too. Slam-fast movement and the rage of speed. almost reckless, out of control. You couldn't have the one without the other. He couldn't find the edge to separate the fear from the anger. Maybe they were one piece, the same thing. Jules' mom hated his father more than anything. That fucking animal. She'd only started cursing after she found out about the affair. The sound of Arctodus slithered over the path. A low quivering. Jules froze with one foot in front of the other, his breath shallow as the growl rose to a slavering snarl, and another, and then a roar. The silence sank back over everything like fog. Arctodus shouldn't scare him anymore. Not really. But of course it did. It would always scare him. Jules took another step. He touched the rocky outcrop that hid the great bear. The rocks were lined with frost. His fingertips burned with cold that was entirely real. Real ice on fake rocks. Real moonlight on imitation wilderness. He stepped around the boulders. Arctodus should have been posed on a rumbly mound, reared up with one giant paw raised. But the plinth was empty. Just the painted background of a sparse scrubland. There was no place for the bear to have gone. Jules approached, looking to either side as if Arctodus's enormous, furious mass might be tucked behind a tree. There was no guardrail between the path and the raised dais of mounded stone that usually kept Arctodus out of arm's reach. The placard that told you about the bear was still in place. Jules touched the sign. He looked up at the empty piles of rocks. And then he was climbing, dress shoes slipping, hands on cold, real stone, waiting for alarms to sound, waiting to be dragged away and scolded and punished. But nothing happened. Jules climbed up to where Arctodus should have stood. He was afraid, and he was sorry he had come. Except he had to come here, and he couldn't ever go back. He had stepped off the path and into the place where the bear should have been. Lips quivering, he crouched on the rocks. Jules looked over the path through time. He showed the path his teeth. There was a great sigh behind him, or above, or around him, and Arctodus was exactly where it had always been. It was Jules that was changed, because he wasn't on the path. He stood instead directly beneath Arctodus, with his back to it. The bear had returned, or had been there all along. Jules craned his neck up and saw the great shape looming above him. Its coat was all the shades of shadow and stone, and its mottled, slobbering mouth was frozen open in a roar. He felt its presence, its largeness, the terror of it, like a sudden fall. The room's soundtrack started up again, that low, building growl. The bear's hind feet were planted on either side of Jules, legs like pine trunks, fur faintly blue in the frozen light. He smelt the musk of its tangled, burr-snarled coat, the wet meat stink of its breath. Arctodus wasn't real, hollow inside its fake fur. Just drama and awe. Its teeth were something else's teeth. The leather of its paws was some other animal's skin. But Jules could smell its foul, thick, animal reek. It bellowed. Jules felt its massive chest vibrate as it rose to its full height. He looked straight up at the jagged, nonsense shapes tattered with dark fur. His eyes couldn't make sense of what he saw. And anyway, they swam with adrenaline. The roar coughed to an end. The bear's huge jaws clapped shut. A strand of drool slunk out of the corner of its mouth and slimed to the floor next to Jules's foot. It turned its face down toward him, eyes blank like a crocodile's. Arctodus stood over him, looking down as Jules looked up, its head over Jules' head. Its head over Jules' head. The weight of it surrounded him, wrapping him, enormous but also just big enough, like an adult's coat or a closet that you hid inside. Shivering with delight at your own terror. Jules shuddered. He could feel the bear's claws extended from the ends of his own fingers. Feel the bear's teeth hot inside his own mouth. Canines pressing into his lips. He breathed Arctodus's stinking breath. It wasn't real, but it was real enough. This was the end of the path through time. There was nowhere for him to go but forward. Man, oh man. That was quite the story, huh? When I read the little footnote for this one, I was pretty excited to get to it. The way it was put, it seemed like a night at the museum type of concept. And I think because it reminded me of Night at the Museum, the fact that it included familial discord kind of blew my mind. Hang on. I was trying to find some tabletop audio that was not foreboding, but it seems like none of those are, or not many of them are kind of chill. There are chill ones, I know that, but I'm gonna just throw back on the sessions Diana as we talk. So, the descriptors in this story, man. Oh my gosh. I hope I did it justice. I mean, it's visceral. Visceral. Oh. Why was that censored? You talking about Small Monsters? That one was sick. Jules felt its massive chest vibrate as it rose to its full height. Gosh. And the slow crawl of things just being a tad different from the way that he initially knew it. So good, man. You know, with the beginning of it, it does just seem, yeah, this is just his imagination, right? He's an imaginative kid that escapes into his imagination due to his rough circumstances. So, it makes sense that he might, he might enjoy bringing this exhibit to life in his own kind of, in some ways, twisted ways. I think Sophia played a pretty integral part as well. This idea that someone, although an annoying cousin, was reaching out to him, asking him to play with her, to play with the other cousins, to enjoy the party, despite her not really catching on to what Jules was feeling in that moment, in that day. She still tried to reach out to him and save him from from having to address his history. I'm trying to figure out if some of this, because we know a little bit about his history through just his mom's, the interactions with his mother and his Aunt Lydia. But I'm trying to think about whether or not his interactions with the portions of the exhibit that came to life, if those directly correlate to moments in his past. Some Russian literature. Yeah, Small Monsters was sick. Honestly, I think I would like to. Hang on, bookmarks, short stories. I wanted to see what else she's made or written. Only one other posted on Tor. The Time Invariance of Snow. The devil made a mirror. A physicist broke it, and shards fell through reality and changed everything forever. Oh, there is more. And then we have the white. Throated transmigrant. After a bird fatally collides with her car, a troubled young woman's life changes irrevocably. Bird fatally collides with her car? Jeez. Okay. It may be worth checking out the rest of E. Lily Yu's works. Not sure. I may save that for next time. But the authors that put out bangers, it's often a good idea to see what else they've made. See where their origins were from. I mean, it's similar to any content, right? Like, I find a YouTube creator that I'm fond of, or that I enjoy a video of, I'll check out some of their other works. Yeah, man, bird death can majorly screw up your day. But it didn't just say day. It says changes the woman's life irrevocably. Jeez. I mean, it must be like some kind of circumstance, right? where the troubled woman was struggling with something else in her life, and then the bird collides with her car, and that just like correlates to something else that was really bothering her. Or maybe not. Not sure. And do I have a right for public use? Oh, are you asking if I've ever written a story? He was a literal big bird. Dude. The trial of the century. Local woman, in a fit of road rage, kills Big Bird. Candle vigils around Sesame Street. Oh. Shoot. Because the first one... Sorry, I'm going back to this story for just a sec. Because, again, I want to look at each of these moments when the exhibit comes to life. He says your parents are dead. And this was because a lot of times, parents didn't come back in those days. Do you think this is him reflecting his own, again, towards the end there, how the anger built up in him? Do you think this is Jules reflecting his anger towards his own parents? I'm not sure. The other thing I wanted to mention is something that is kind of it relates to something I experienced growing up. The desire for his mom, from his mom, for him to tell his poem. That kind of hit me. I know, and I'm certainly not the only one, but I was in that scenario a lot growing up. I'd be at a party with my family, and I would have, created a paper or a poem, or had a part in a play or a musical, like a song. I was like a solo in the musical that I was doing, and they would want me to sing it aloud. And some kids really flourish in those moments, where they're asked to do it, and that's what they were wanting the whole time. They had it ready and rearing to go. They stood up there immediately and sung it out as best they could. But for me, it always seemed like, and I think it might have just been due to my perspective as a kid. But whenever I was asked, it always felt like, it wasn't my idea, so it would only be a performance that came from a place of humoring the audience, And the goal isn't, and I guess in a way, some like comedians and performers do simply wish to humor the audience and give them what they want. But it's almost like akin to if a I don't know, someone was like rehearsing a play for an audience, but then was told to put it on like out of the blue. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm explaining this correctly, but I gotta say, I feel for Jules in that scenario, because I myself have been there. As far as if I've written anything, I've written scripts before. I went to, film school for a year. Couple that I'm fairly proud of. One in particular was a story about a monster that was created by a scientist in a village. The scientist's laboratory was a little bit of an offshoot from the village, but essentially the scientist created this monster, left one day to go have a meeting with with some of its companions, and never returned. And so, when the scientist left, it left a little note for Pama, is the name of the monster. Left a little note saying, Pama, please remember to water the plants and be good. And so, when people finally discover this abandoned laboratory, they find the monster, and the monster has literally created, carved into like the floor due to just this path that it has walked day after day. And it's been watering this tiny plant, because the rest of the plants in the facility have died. And the last plant that's remaining is simply growing out of like a crack in the ground. And so it waters this tiny little weed that is the last, remaining bit of life that is in the facility. The monster has never left. Pama stayed and continued to just water the plants for years and years and years. But finally, the monster leaves. Oh, that's right. It wasn't that someone discovered the monster. It's that a cat came in and distracted the monster. Finally got the monster to step outside. And the monster outside sees... well, I guess I could read this aloud. I don't necessarily want to ruin the ending. But I feel like it was in a script format, but it could pretty easily be transformed into a short story format. Yeah, man, always a cat. Dude, cats are great in stories, especially if you need something to drive, drive movement. I like, for instance, in freaking Tales of Arise. Been playing that with a buddy of mine, Coleman. There's a part in it when you get to, what is it, Calaglia? No, Calaglia is the hot place. Shoot. Where is Dohalim from? Menancia? Menancia, I think that's it. In Menancia, Teresa's brother, his name was Millie? Frick. What? What's his brother's name? What was her brother's name? Miguel. Thank you, Coleman. Oh shoot, you mentioned Menancia too. Nice. Yeah, in Menancia, Miguel, who runs the organization that's there, the underground, the way that they find Miguel and speak with him is that his cat leads them leads them to where their little underground facility is. Um, which they're not the Nightwings. The Nightwings were in Cisladin, right? Sorry, all that to say, cats are a great way um to get your characters to like find find something that they need to see. Man. Oh, so that was one of the stories that I wrote. Another story that I wrote when I was really little was pretty epic. It was I wish that I could find it. I wrote it and it was stupid long. The grammar was pretty much abhorrent. It was essentially, I think, about a super chihuahua action like matador or something. That's probably not exactly it, but essentially, like, you get the picture. It was this like mega epic chihuahua headed super action hero who who saved the world. It's quite the story. I wrote it when I was I think 9 years old. I wish I could remember the actual title, but that is one that I recall writing. And then there are, certainly stories for the background and origins of, some of the D&D stuff that I do. Let me see. While we're just talking, yeah, dude, super chihuahua. I remember it had something to do with a chihuahua. I'm certain of that. And it was something, man. All right, let's see. Because I have the story of hang on, flipping through. Yeah. This wasn't a very long thing, but it's the story of Toile. Toile, a titan of immense cunning, power, and ability, was created to serve the seamstress by carrying out her will. He strove for perfection for his creator. He repaired, he destroyed. He shone light, he emit darkness. He brought order, he brought chaos. If the seamstress called, Toile answered. He loved her creation, everything within the seam, from the vast expanse of space to the smallest particle. But most of all, Toile loved his seamstress. When the time came for the seamstress to move on, he wanted to go with her, or at the very least be left with the task of caring for and tending to the realm that she was leaving. Needle was created, and Toile was sure that this meant he would be brought into the new realm that the seamstress would weave. The seamstress left, so Toile waited, still steadfast in his belief that the seamstress would one day, someday soon, tear him from the world, so he could be with her once more. That day did not come, as the seamstress was lost to history, and he thought to be dead. Twalei's power grew dull. With the loss of power came a lack of purpose, and Twalei faced extinction. So he decided to stop waiting and fill the role he felt the seamstress had left him here to fill. Being no stranger to severed ties, chaos, madness, and darkness, he took these to the core of his being. Fraying from the dualistic purpose he'd been created for, Twalei lost sight of his times of refuge and serenity. To regain his power and one day be reunited with his seamstress, Twalei took on the name Thread and began his new life not as a titan, but as a god. And there's some bits left out in that story, actually. The way that Twalei regained his power was by killing and consuming his kind. Anyways, there's more to that, but there are probably some short stories that I could write in the seamstress, or in the seam, the universe of the seam. Some concepts that, yeah, could be worthwhile to explore. And plus, if with this world that I've developed, it would probably be a good way to develop the world itself. Because I've found that the best way that's the best thing for this world that I've been creating has been to run campaigns within it. That's what's actually led to further development in its politics, in its pantheon, all of the bigger world-esque things. And so if I were to write, short stories set within the world, that could help to flesh out just, various parts. Wait, did you say the Super Chihuahua sounds metal AF? Or the or these stories sound metal? I'll tell you what though, if I write okay, we'll start with this. My assignment to myself for next Sunday is to write a short story. And that might be either just transferring that story about Pama, the monster that got left behind, into a short story. I may just be doing that, or it'll be a short story set in Velvet, within the seam. But I think that would be a good challenge to myself. I will write a short story, and then we'll read it aloud here on the Three Attic Network. And if that goes well, then I'll try to do that each week. And yeah, I think that would be pretty tight. If anybody else wants to join me on that, if anybody ever posts literally any story that you either have written in the past or will write, I would be honored to check it out on this channel. We'll probably have a dedicated stream for it if we get some some interested viewers. But seriously, if you enjoy my voice and would like to hear your very own words read aloud by yours truly, then, as I said, I'd be honored. Yeah, for real. So, in an effort to encourage that, I am going to write a short story myself. I've decided that. We're going to return on Sunday, and if I see any more short stories thrown up into the Three Attic Network Discord, then we'll have more to read. And I I will try to screen them. Any that are sent on in, well, I'll try to screen them beforehand, just to make sure that they are appropriate. Of course, I'm sure that's assumed by you viewers, but we're not asking for fan fiction here. Please. I've read that stuff in the past. It can be comedic in nature. I'm happy for that. There can be, some cursing in there if you're feeling edgy, or if it applies well to your story. But keep it PG-13. Yeah, I remember. I think it was for one of the milestones for my channel. I read the Sonic High School, the classic that is Sonic High School. Yeah, there are some really good fan fiction. I've heard, oddly enough, the fan fiction all about Subspace Emissary is oddly fantastic and well written. I don't know how much that holds up, but but I've been curious to try to check it out. The other fan fiction that I've read was my Immortal. Yes, My Immortal. The Harry Potter fan fiction that was so legendary in its time and still to this day. Shoot, which fan fictions were you checking out, Kingy? If I might ask. I tried to look for I think Avatar The Last Airbender fan fiction, and the only other fan fiction that I've checked out was for Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Some Rick Riordan fan fiction I was hoping to stumble across, but did not. I don't think I ended up finding any that were immensely worthwhile. Ooh, Star Wars fanfic would probably be pretty based. And DBZ, yo, that I feel like DBZ's fan fiction would be a fun ride. But yeah. Let me see. I don't think I have any of the stories here. And then I wrote, in my history, I wrote some stories for literature classes, right? Throughout my high school years. I wonder if it's even possible that I could find those again. We've got Golan, do you mind if I show them our document for our two roleplay RPG character origins? Yo, tight. Check this. Oh, it's beautiful. Oh, baby. All right. So Tug, Ook was born at the tender age of 0 in a forest in Felden or Felland. He was raised by his mother until he was 5 when she passed away. That's when Dawn decided it was time to explore the world. During his adventures, Flea connected with nature and started learning the ways of the druid. He spent his time wandering through nature and stopping by the occasional town. When Jack was 15, the sun dispersed. At first, He thought seeing the stars constantly was a blessing, but after a few months, he started to miss the sun. But more importantly, the life that it brought. With the sun gone, and the plants slowly withering away, he decided that he should learn how to incorporate into society, which he did in a small town, where he made quick friends with the locals, telling stories of his travels throughout the land and helping those in need for food and a room to stay in. Ka gained a reputation in town as someone who the townsfolk and travelers could come to for help. Eventually, this led him to a young tabaxi who Tug took in as a mentor. If you're wondering why the name changes every sentence, it is because I think it's in the turtle backgrounds that turtles have a tendency to just change their name whenever it suits them, which I think is pretty clever. Pretty sweet. My character was Brittle Dust. Brittle Dust was born to Aurora of Winter and Breath of Dust in a small tribe of Tabaxi at the southern coastline of what the tribes of Gurak called the Shivering Willow Clan. As a lad, Dust struggled to keep up with his kin. Many of his brothers and sisters learned to hunt, fish, and cook quite quickly, but Dust seemed to just slow his siblings down. Despite his inadequacies and shortcomings, Dust smiled and gave his best, even if his siblings often told him he ought to just give up and go freeze to death in a lake. Only Grandma Winter, End of Winter, encouraged Dust and offered him the grace he so desperately desired. "They'll see," Grandma Winter used to say. "Someday soon, it'll be my little Brittle's time to shine." Sadly, shining didn't seem to be Dust's specialty either. In fact, Dust often went unnoticed during the clan's various celebrations and traditional feasts. In his darkest times, Dust held on to those words, "Someday soon, it'll be my time to shine." When he saw the light shooting across the star-speckled sky on his 10th birthday, Dust sat alone, gazing up, and said to himself, "I wish I could shine." Oddly enough, that wish had been granted without Dust noticing first. The light from the shooting star resonated within him and granted him strange and mysterious powers. He became more dexterous and charismatic out of nowhere. Unfortunately, this power soon grew to be more than he could handle and control. As he hunted, he would suddenly be shrouded in blinding light that would scare away his prey. When cooking, the food sometimes flew out of the pan and clung to his fur for minutes at a time, followed quickly by a face full of solid clay. Even with this gift, Dust felt he was just simply inadequate, in a new and more dangerous way. And so, as the years went by, a question often arose in his head. Why me? Where did this magic come from? And why didn't it fix who I am? Why the fuck did we go to the Aryan Republic? That's right. And then our other two characters were Dr. Podrick Dawn Petal and Dusty Miller. Monkey and a Man, A Tale of Two Goobers. Let's go. Yeah, these ones were something. I was born to a pair of interstellar gardeners, as they like to call themselves, Lily Dawn Petal and Donovan Dawn Petal. Growing up, I aided my parents' efforts to study newly discovered plant life on freshly discovered planets. As a result, I didn't have a stable home and grew used to the stellar nomadic life. I loved the risk and adrenaline that came from putting my life in danger for the sake of knowledge. My little sister, Persephone, Fawn/Fauna, Dawn Petal, was not nearly as boisterous. She was timid, fair, gentle, and delicate, much like the flower she was named for. She had elegant white locks and faded yellow roots, so that whenever I looked down at her in the gardens from the balcony, she looked like she belonged among the flowers she tended to. It was in the gardens that she spent most of her time, practicing her songs as she skipped along the gravel paths, checking on each bud, every leaf and stem. And then I had the idea that she was taken by sex slavers. Father was so distraught he ended his life. Mom is somewhere along. I left home a long time ago to search for my sister. Haven't seen her in years. Yo, Randy. What's good, my man? What's poppin'? What is shaking, my dude? No, but for real, I'm glad you made it. Yeah. Yeah, we were so shoot, we did kind of go off on a tangent here, but I think that might have been for the best. After all, we only had about an hour remaining, which we maybe could have finished another story in that time, but this is nice to give my throat a chance to rest. Yo, Randy, you just tried D&D? You're darn right it's cash. Yeah, man. I think one of my groups, we are gonna have to go on a break because of people's schedules and such over the winter here, over Christmas. But that may give me time to start preparing for another campaign, perhaps. But we can talk about that later on. Yeah, man, for real. Without a doubt, Randy. What may I ask, where does your story start? And where did you come from? Who is your character, and where did the good old DM plop you? To begin the story. Randy? All right. Well, no worries there. I would love to know your Oh, hey. Nice. Took a little bit to send the message. I am Lokatha, named Zenit. Oh, a Lokatha. I am a Lokatha, named Zenit. I was an escaped slave who befriended one of those sea cats named Splish. However, I was tracked down by my former captors, and they beat me near to death and stole my damn cat. So I decided to completely abandon my people's ideals and morals and become a barbarian. What is a Lokatha? I've heard that before. Oh! Well, snap. These guys. Yeah, the fish peeps. You had a cat? Was it a fish cat? Absolutely no clue where the story is taking place at the moment. The DM's doing a small one shot to get everyone familiarized, since it's all new people mostly. That's good. The fish people are wild. I honestly haven't looked too far into their culture and such. But fishmen, pretty pretty solid choice. Kind of fishy choice though. If you ask me, it's fishy. That choice is fishy. Gandhi fish? No way. Shoot. That's kind of excellent. Hmm. If I was a fish, if I was a fish man, a Lokatha, what would my name be? Is there a name? What's a brand of fish food? Zumed Sprinulina. Sprinulina. Fluval, bug bites, Cichlid formula. I'm gonna be Fluval. Fluval, I think, is a good name. Gandhi fish band name dibs. Yeah. I was gonna play as a monk grung until I found out they were banned as being a playable class for really good reasons. Oh. Oh. Hmm. Yeah, I think that might not go too well. That might not be a good one. Might not be the best thing. They got the poison hands. Shoot. I didn't even think about that. One of my players is a grung paladin. Named Grumbino. No, sorry, Grogan Grumbino Grung is his full name. Let me type that out for you. Grogan Grumbino Grung. Oh, also, sorry, it doesn't say merrymitch there. In the chat, I have it loaded up on my my alt account. But yeah, it's kind of brilliant though. Honestly, I am a lot of the time often so down with kind of more joke-ish names being taken completely seriously within like the confines of the world. There is a well, oh man, I mean I've allotted various characters. One of my characters in Coleman in the gang's game, the Crawling Dust Crew, is named Goy Fiari. That's spelled Goife, comma Yarri. Goy Fiari. And he's an alien, right? One of the fiber spawn that live on the moon. And they are the one of the things is that every single name in their society is a meme from the real world. But they got no clue. It's entirely natural and normal in their society. We got Main Yon. We have E Ka Li. We have I forget what the last one is now, but you get the idea. Yo, raccoon folk would be sick. Is he as small as like raccoon? Is he raccoon sized? Or is he a little bit bigger, like halfling sized? What? They're 5'8"? I would have to see one in person to truly be fit to judge. That sounds kind of terrifying. You've seen raccoons, right? They're pretty intimidating. No trash is safe. Indeed. Yeah, the dumpster of every tavern. Wiped clean, baby. And your monk is a halfling. Nice. Honestly, halfling characters tend to be just a solid pick in any scenario. I just realized nobody picked the human. Yeah. I think there's no humans in either of my campaigns. Let's see, we've got... Wait, no, that's not true. In the Jealous Twilight, I have a human. I have one human. But I think Crawling Dusk, we have Goblin. Reborn Fearbolg, rather. Wait, Rodrigo! Gosh, how could I forget? We got one human in each campaign, actually. That's pretty good. Their version... No! Oh shoot, I got about 1 minute till my time is up. So, let's go ahead and call it for the day. Guys, we didn't get the chance to start a second story, but I think come Thursday, we're going to be checking out another one of Lily Yu's stories. Perhaps hear about a bird fatally colliding with a car, or a devil that created a mirror. Either one could be a solid story. Or we might start this one. This is a longer one, but it seemed worthwhile. It's called Across the Dark Water. An uncontrollable plague has left the city in ruins and trapped in perpetual quarantine. A thief hires a guide to lead him safely through the city's many dangers to the one person who can give him the travel papers he needs to escape. In light of history, the history of the past year or two, I feel like this one could be interesting to check out. Oh, I didn't even show yet. Whoa, hang on. This one. Cross Dark Waters. Okay, now I shall start the outro theme and wish you guys a good rest of the stream. Hey, remember to take the merriment that we found here together today. Let it set you at ease as you go into the rest of your day, and let it carry you into tomorrow. Remember, if you ever feel like Jules did, where life is overwhelming you, or your history seems to just be bubbling up inside you and won't leave you alone, it's best to go address it. Go back into the past. See what it is that you fear most. Let it settle within you and then move on. Keep on moving, guys. Best of luck with the rest of the 3 Addict Network stream. Love you guys bunches. And I've been Merry Mitch. Till next time. Bye.